Okay. So reminder, midterm. So next week I'll send out, reminder email too. Okay. So nobody forget about it. Okay. Now, we didn't have a time to review many cases, but I will just squeeze in as much as I can. But at this point, I am going to go forward. Um, today's we are going to start with the metal framework try-in, and if we need it, we will need to do the corrected cast impression. Okay, so this is what we left out. Number one, you survey the master cast, they draw the design, and everything was good. You fill out the work authorization paper, and we send out to the lab. And we expecting having it back number four, right? Between one and four, that you don't do any of it. Those are lab work. Lab technician will do it. Two and three, but I want to understand. Okay, what will happen when you have it back number four? Why is all my drawing gone? Because what they do when they receive your master cast, they put up with your tripod mark on the surveyor and they block out. Is there any undercut they block out first? Then they duplicate this cast to fabricate refractory cast. That's number three. After they duplicate this refractory cast, and then they make wax up for metal framework. And then they will use a whole cast to cast. That is exactly the same as crown casting, but it's huge. It's a lot bigger. Okay, and then after casting's done, this refractory cast will be gone, and then they will give you back your master cast. Okay, so that's what happens, and you only see number one, and you get it back number four. Okay, this is years we've been doing this. This is actually my case I did when I was, pros resident. But school right now it changed. Your number one step is exactly the same. Number four step, you still see the exactly the same. But between one and four, number two and number three is different. Now, digital, what we do is you don't have this slide because you will have a whole lecture for the RPD, the digital, okay? So I'm just to slide in there what's changing in school. So if we send out mastercast, lab will scan it. They don't do survey anymore, okay? They scan whole thing with your drawing in it, and according to your tripod mark, the software has a surveyor. So we put it right exactly you put in the surveyor, and then block out. Instead of using wax, we block out what in software. Okay, you block out that red part is block out, and then we apply major connector, REST and all this on in the software. Okay, from here when we're done, we can whole file can send to the 3D printer, and this is 3D printing. Okay, 3D printer is not expensive anymore. It's even we school have it. School have milling machine and 3D printer, scanner. We have all the equipment. We are going this way. Right now, we're sending out, but they are doing this way. So at this point, when you have it all done with the, partial design with the metal work, actually metal work all in the software, and then we can send it to the 3D printer, and then that can be invested and casting can be done. Okay, or the file can send to the laser welding machine, and they can sintering. So it depends on the lab has how they equip. So it can be right now lab doing casting or some casting or no casting. So, but we don't see difference, right? So we send out number one and you get it back number four. Now, number four, when you have this casting back, you should be able to evaluate whatever, how they processed, how they made this framework, okay? So that will be same. How they make it, that doesn't matter. Dentist work is exactly same, okay? That's why this number one stage is very critical because you should be able to survey and have a design that's the dentist's job, okay? It cannot be replaced. So even if it's going to be digital, they have a more or critically they don't take any cases without your signature, dentist signature, and your license number. If this framework is not working well or something was wrong, harm to patient, that's your fault. Lab doesn't want to take any responsibility, okay? So they really taking your license, okay, at this point. Okay, today's work is we are going to evaluate on the cast and intraorally and how we go forward from there. Okay, so we're gonna start at number four. Okay, you got it back. Okay, before you bring the patient in, you can evaluate on the cast, method cast, how it fit, right? So this one just a cross section of the clasp should adapt well, like left side of a picture. That clasp cross section has to be fitting nicely, okay, not rocking or you don't want to gap anywhere. Investigate your framework. Make sure there's no defect anywhere, no nozzles, polished or finished well. If it's not, that may break some part, okay? So we're gonna go step by step, okay? And also make sure master cast came back as you way you send it out. Means there's no broken part. Sometimes it does. If it's abutment broken and they glue it back, then you have to report, okay? Because that framework doesn't fit. Now, whose fault is it? If you came back, you have a cast back, but they broke a tooth and you don't know when they broke that abutment, before or after it's fabricated. So if they glue it back, that is not accurate. So if they damage the cast and framework is not fitting well, then we can recast to remake it. But who's gonna pay? Lab has to pay. Okay. So, but everything is perfect, but it's not fitting in the patient mouth, then it's your fault. Okay. So, you have to really find out when you have it bad. You check your framework, also your master cast. Okay. So dentist work is impression, master cast, and prescription. And the lab technicians doing duplicating the master cast and the refractory cast and wax up. So if it's digitally done, these three steps will be gone. The lab is not using wax anymore, right? And just casting and polishing, or not even casting. That's going to, um, the laser welder will just make it fabricated. Okay, so that can be done. Depends on what they have. Okay, so when you look at it, how do we evaluate? Make sure it's not rocking on the master cast. Okay, so hard tissue around the teeth area, rest sits well, clasp fits very well. Okay, and I'm not sure you can see this little nozzle here. If that's there, okay, you have to be aware of it. That should be removed, right? So so you have to investigating, your master cast and how it fits and the framework. one by one. Okay, first, major connector, rest, proximal plate, finish line is properly placed. Okay, class of assembly and the Redis work. We're going to check one by one. Major connector, what's the major connector's functioning? Rigidity is very critical, right? So make sure it's made properly, especially if it's a plate, it's okay around this junction, but if it is a bar, do you remember Dr. Pusateri was like focus on that Redis work has to start halfway of the bar, right? Not above, not below, because that junction is very weak. Okay. So major connector, remember, make sure this maxilla has to be 6 millimeter below about this border, and also lower if it's a lingual bar, 4 millimeter, and the width of the bar should be 4 millimeter. So you can investigate everything. You can evaluate all of that with our patient first. And also major connector, if it is plate, make sure it's the shape. Okay, superior border should be like a scallop appearance. That will help patient feel just natural. If it's a straight line or too high, too low, that won't be good. Okay, so make sure it's right top of the cingulum and scalloped appearance smoothly. Okay, and if patient has a diastema between the teeth, a lot of patient does, especially anterior incisors, then you're gonna make from the beginning when you draw blue line your major connector, make sure it's a step back. Your blue line is indicating your major connector. Anywhere your blue line was not connected means it won't work, because this all metal work has to be connected up and down. They should not have any discontinuation. Okay, so also rest should fit nicely. You don't want to have any gap. You don't want to see any space between tooth or rest prep and rest. Sit fully and there's no space. Okay, and also this the lingual plate has to fit nicely. You don't want to space, you don't want a gap, you don't want to see any gap between there, and clasp also touching nicely tooth surface. Okay, and I wrote here, this is what you're going to check intraorally. You don't want to have any interference in the occlusion. Okay, and also thickness of rest. Not sure you remember last year when you do the prep, rest prep on the typodont tooth, number 20 and number 28, you made depth. You're measuring 1 to 1.5 on the marginal ridge, right? That was depth of rest prep, means that the thickness of your rest. Okay, so when you're adjusting intraorally, make sure you have a thickness gauge. Okay, I know you're using this one when you're adjusting crowns, but also you need this thickness gauge when you're adjusting metal framework. So have it ready. Okay. Also, proximal plate. Okay, a little bit different when you have a tooth supported, like class 3 is different from distal extension, class 1 or 2. Okay, so distal extension, you're expecting, around the 2 millimeter. Okay, so that'll be a little bit different. And finish line, you check it out. Okay, make sure that junction, internal and external finish line, this area, this is internal area, right? You have to be able to see it sharply defined. Okay, because acrylic start right from there, right? And slightly undercut because it has to hold the, help giving a little bit of retention for the acrylic. So you make sure that is properly finished. C clasp. Okay. Well, we know the number, 1.5, and then if it is a reciprocal arm, it's going to be uniform thickness. If it's a retentive arm, terminal third will be one or half of a thickness, right? That's somewhere there. Okay. So also slightly retentive, okay, and should be support the stability because you're checking also in it, make sure it's not rocking. Did I skip? Yes. And also when you are evaluating this metal framework on the cast, if you request a rod wire or combination clasp, just to bring it back your memory from last year, terminal third of clasp should be away from gingival margin at least 1.5 to 2 millimeter, right? And if you see like this, whole clasp laying down in the gingiva, that's not going to be good. Okay, so that'll cause period problem, and you don't want to have that. So if that happen, you can replace this rod wire because the rod wire is not the part of a casting. So if it's placed incorrectly, you can request them to replace it. Okay. And also, this is a facial, right? When you look at the lingually, where they put the joint, solder joint, if it's too facially or buccally, it's not, too close to the clasp, that won't be good because it's not going to be flexible. Also, solder joint means that junction will be soldering, right? Means they add more metal in it. It's a thicker metal there. Right there, what's going to happen? You are going to have a problem setting teeth right there because this is tooth and you have to set the dental tooth right there. Impossible, right? That's why we recommend to have a rod wire or combination clasp. That has to be solder joints should be lingually positioned. That way you have a room to set the teeth. Okay, so those are all those things you have to really check it out with our patient. Okay, so make sure that they relieve this right under the radius work. They relieve, so properly relieved. Okay, or this little bit different. This is one way open loops for the detention, or some have a little, the radius work. And also, if patient has a tori, make sure it's going around it or it's properly positioned the way you draw. Okay, and also radius work. I hope everybody remember 2/3 of that distal extension area, right? Make sure it's not too long or too short. So we check everything on the cast when you have it back. Those are all you can do without patient. Everything looks good, then you have a patient in your chair.
Dr. Kim, I just had a question regarding the last slide. So, how do we quantify a good tissue relief?
Usually they leave. You will see right below the radius work, and also they always make a tissue stop on the posterior of this the radius work. So you should be able to see a little space between the tissue surface on the cast and also metal framework. You will see little there, okay? And tissue stop should be laying on the cast, okay? So remember that part. We will check that intraorally. If you see that tissue stop on the cast right laying down there, means you have to be able to see that exactly intraorally. Okay, so Can I continue?
Yes, Dr. Kim, thank you.
Okay, very good. So whenever you're doing removable, which tray do we need? 6 tray. Don't get 1 tray. One tray doesn't have anything, just mirror and expose, right? 6 tray will provide wax spatula, mixing spatula, and all the things you need for the removable, okay? And then Bunsen burner. We have occlude, that's the green spray, and this is disclosing wax. Jar is exactly similar to PIP, but if you look at the label, it says disclosing wax. Okay, and articulating paper and handpiece. Okay, are we ready to have a patient? Yes. Now, when you're using occlude, this green spray, I just switch the slide and then I upload the lecture again because that was in the behind wax, the disclosing wax. Anybody has a different order, just to download again. I just switch the next slide. Okay. So this tip, okay. Right now, what we have in the clinic says occlude. That's the name of a bottle, and tip is separated. So you have to find the tip. This is disposable. So you have to put the tip into it and then you shake it and spray. Do it by the sink. Okay, it's a spray. It goes everywhere. So holding in the sink and then you spray it. Okay, spray thin layer evenly. Okay, and then you are going to try in the patient mouth. Okay, so that's one, one medium we can use in this stage. And next one is how to use this disclosing wax. Do not take a whole jar. We have only one jar in the whole floor. Okay, so if you plan to use it, just scoop it with that tongue depressor. You don't need a lot, you just need a little bit. So you just scoop it. Only bring this much to your chair and leave the in the station so somebody else can use. So you just use a wax spatula, scoop it a little bit, and then melt in Bunsen burner, and then you can apply where you like to see. Okay, apply into the framework where you like to see the internal surface in some area. Okay, so when you try in the patient mouth, do not put your finger pressure into the distal extension area because it's going to rocking also, and that pushing it down. Okay, soft tissue, you cannot push it. Okay, so when you try in the patient mouth, make sure you pressing wherever it's a rest or some hard tissue area. Okay, and then you can check if there is any excess, you can adjust it. Okay, before you go into the patient mouth, we're gonna do something else first. We okay. Okay, fine. We're checking this fits well or if there's any interference or discrepancy in the metalwork. So if you see anything, you can adjust it. Okay, but show to faculty first. Can I adjust that area? What you see? Okay, so that's the two medium I just showed you. Okay, so that's how we're using it. Occlude, that's the green spray, and disclosing wax. That's the two things you can use to check internal surface of a metal framework. Now, you do that, and next one is checking occlusion. Okay, before you putting a framework, you check how they occluding. Okay, if it's patient has an upper complete denture, you cannot check the occlusion. Okay, so don't even try. But if it's against the dentition, okay, natural teeth, first you check the occlusion without framework. So have all the mark and then check. Oh, she's occluding this much in this tooth. You remember, okay? And then if you're making only one RPD, you can go ahead and do it. If you're making upper RPD and lower RPD, then you are going to do one arch at a time. Okay, so place upper RPD and then check the occlusion. Is occlusion showing exactly same as without? That's good. If it's some heavy contact in the metal work, means you have to adjust it, especially rest area. Okay, so when with the framework, the occlusion has to be exactly the same. If okay, and you check and adjust it and take upper one out. Now you're gonna put the lower one in, lower RPD framework, and then check the occlusion, do exactly the same. It has to be exactly the same without. Okay, both are adjusted one at a time. Now you're gonna put both into the patient mouth, and then make sure that it's still exactly the same as without RPD in the patient mouth. Okay, so very easy mistake of people increasing vertical, or you found out when you set the teeth that's getting too late. Okay, it means you have to reset the teeth. So if this corner have a mark and that's interfering occlusion, take it out. Don't try to just framework intraorally, please. Okay, take it out and do outside. Okay, there's no reason to do intraorally at all. Okay, and also when you're adjusting using the thickness gauge, if you are adjusting the rest, make sure you have a still thickness of a rest 1 to 1.5 at least, and then you can adjust it. Okay, so this is a summary of the one arch at a time. Okay, and then two arch goes in, you're doing at the same time. Okay, now that's all you planned for the day. Then we're done. Everything fits well. Okay, this is a scenario of you doing metal framework, trying and fitting very well. Then you don't have to worry about it. Okay, we all set, right? So we're gonna just to summarize what you did today. Patient presents clinic for upper RPD or lower RPD or upper and lower RPD framework trying, medical reviewed, and metal framework tried with occlude that green spray and adjust it if you need it. Okay. Ocular contact adjusted one arch at a time and both together. And evaluation of a framework was fitting very well intraorally and the same as on the cast. If it was different, we have to do something different. Okay, so that's evaluation of a framework. Okay, this is the only time you can go ahead doing forward. If this is not true, then we have to do the extra steps. Okay, at this point, okay, everything looks good, then you are going to make a distal settle with a tinfoil and wax rim. Now, depends on faculty, they will decide which material you are going to use. This one I use this way because it's easiest way. You don't have to do any extra work. If some faculty use a triad or oral cure resin, you have to follow their instruction. Those are more stable and it's nice to do set the teeth. Okay, but I'm doing this way because if you use triad or oral cure resin, after you final trying with the teeth, you have to take them all out and you have to remove that triad. We cannot process with it. Okay, so you have to remove it. If I'm using tinfoil and Waxerin because tinfoil is easy to remove. I don't have to remove teeth. I can just remove tinfoil from other side and then get going. Okay, so at this one you have to follow your instruction with your faculty. Okay, and then take a by registration. Now, when you have a framework with master cast back, they give you back always split how you mount it. Okay, so when you have a by registration here, hopefully you have an index in the master cast, so you can put it back, and your byte registration is exactly same. Then that's great. Okay, if you did not make an index in your master cast, then you cannot put it back this the split cast because you don't know, you cannot put it back as accurate. Okay, so you have to remount it. If you had the index and you put it back with the split cast and byte registration is exactly same with your mounting, then you can skip that. You can just glue it back. But if you forgot to make an index in your master cast, then you have to mount it with this byte registration. Okay, so if you every single step, if you do step by step, accurately, you save a lot of time. Okay, and then also this case, because you can mount it, you can order teeth. Since you are using blue line Ivoclar teeth, their recommendation is using foam selector. It comes with shade guide, so ask dispensary, can I have a blue line shade guide, because you have to select the shade anyway, right? So get them. Then you have to measure the width of Allah, write it down what it is, and then it'll tell you which size of it is, small, medium, or large, and select the shade. Okay, and you can select the mold. You know, and always the shade has to be selected by patient. Okay, if you decide and patient, oh, I don't care, but you didn't even let them look at it, then when they come back, when you set the teeth, patient, I don't like it, it's too dark. What are you gonna do? You have to reorder teeth and you have to reset the whole thing over. So always verify with the patient. And I write in the progress note always, okay, patient verified or patient selected. Okay, so that should be in there. So that's your insurance kind of. Okay, so this is the simplest case and everything goes well, and that's it. And next visit will be teeth try-in, and you just verify with the faculty, and then teeth try-in and insertion done, right? Okay, now second scenario is upper complete lower PD. You didn't even check the occlusion because the patient doesn't have upper teeth, right? So you just check intraorally and then cast. So if it's well, still same as before. Now you have to do distal saddle has to be ready to take a jaw record. This is the time you are going to take a jaw record with the upper complete. You should last visit when you had the upper complete, I mentioned to you to have a impression done and record base made and wax rim ready by this day. Okay, so A offers is the framework trying. Okay, I put only framework trying, but this day you can even do jaw record that day if your upper record base is ready. If not, you have to postpone it. Okay, so I just this the subcode 4 is only metal framework trying, but if you are doing jaw record, then you can add another code. Okay, can be E5110.2. draw record because one was the impression, that is draw record, and also RPD E 5 2.4. Draw record will be 5. Okay, so it depends on your sequence. Okay, so if everything went well, fits well, and then you have a record base with wax rim for offer ready, then you can do all in this visit. So it's how critical for removable. Be prepared. Okay, being prepared is very critical. You can save a whole session. Okay, so okay, I still wrote the same thing. Okay, fitting well and same as on the cast, and then you made the distal settle, and then upper record base and wax rim. Now we're doing draw record. Facial profile checked first, of course, the same as complete denture, right? That's how we did. And occlusal plane verified parallel to the interpupillary line and ala tragus line. Okay, so that's with the upper wax rim. Evaluated aesthetics, phonetics, you check all those. Okay, midline checked, and vertical dimension of occlusion established, right? And everything looks good. Then you are taking a by registration in CR, central relation, okay? And then take a baseball record. And also select the teeth. Means you have to select the shade, and also you have to measure the width of ala. Okay? So if you can be done, this is not hard. If you prepared well and you know what you're doing, this should be done this time. Okay. Now, both scenario I mentioned about fits well, metal frame fits well, right? Well, what do we do if it doesn't fit? Okay. If it's not overall fitting at all, then maybe you have to the impression and have a new one made. But a lot of the time, okay, it fits very well around the rest and teeth surface. They all fit very well, but doesn't fit well in the distal extension area. Okay, ready to work that area? Because we check with the tissue stop on the cast, tissue stop laying on the cast. We know it, right? There's no gap, no space between soft tissue in the cast and tissue stop. When you insert, when you try in the patient's mouth, everything else fits well, but soft tissue area, distal extension area, there is a 2 millimeter space there. What do? We have a technique. We can reimpression only distal extension area. Okay, so you have to remember how it was fitting on the cast and intraorally. Okay, so that technique we call it corrected, or